Dobar dan svima. Ovdje smo sa Daveom Lallyjem, organizatorom SFeraKona po cijeloj Europi, ali također gospodin koji putuje cijelim svijetom. Postavit ćemo mu nekoliko pitanja da se upoznate s njime. Hello. I want to ask you, how did you get into this story? SFeraKons, video programs, and etc.
Right, well, first of all, I got involved in the world of science fiction by reading my first novel, known as The Dark Cloud by Fred Hoyle, in the mid-60s. And I also got interested in astronomy as well. And whilst here in Zagreb, I popped up to see the observatory, which is lovely, the highest, wonderful view over Zagreb. Anyway, then we were one of the first people in my town in Ireland to get a television set. And in those days, there was no Irish television service, so we picked up the BBC, and we got lots of science fiction on that. And then independent television, which has commercials and isn't a license fee, came from Northern Ireland as well. So we got TV there, and we got more science fiction. And then in 1962, RTE, Irish television, began, and they had some science fiction. So I got a lot of science fiction, and also did less and less homework as I got older. And then I went to my first science fiction convention in the mid-70s and thought, this is wonderful. And I wasn't able to afford to go to lots of them, but I then got involved in going to the World Science Fiction Convention in Brighton in England in 1979. And then in 1987 I went again, and this is a big event with 2,000 or 3,000 people, an awful lot going on. And then I began going to the UK National Convention in 1988, and then I began starting the Irish one in Dublin, which is still going, called Octocon, in 1990. Anyway, and there was a vacancy on the European Science Fiction Society board, and I was asked to be treasurer, and so I got involved. And then the next year I went to Finland for the Eurocon and so on. And then when the Worldcon and the Eurocon came together in Glasgow in 2005, I was elected as chairman. And I began changing a few things in the society, making it more relevant and so on, updating the statutes and all sorts of things. And I'm, of course, a great admirer of conventions all around Europe, and I like to promote them wherever they are. And it's nice to see countries in Europe now bidding against each other for the Eurocon. Before that, we couldn't get anyone to do it. You know, now they're all vying for the job because it adds an extra international flavour to their national convention. So next year, of course, it's here in Zagreb, SFeraKon number 34, called Contact. It's called Contact. And they've already got a great guest of honour, Tim Powers. So we're looking forward to that, coming back next year. I now know Zagreb. I've been around the town. I've had a few beers here. So I'm looking forward, as an expert in Zagreb, coming back next year. So.
You travel a lot. Do you have any private jobs, interests besides this?
Yes. Science fiction is a hobby of mine. I don't do this full time. You wouldn't. I'm in the financial services industry. That's what I do for a living. I'm in the world of pensions, which is very, very boring unless you get older. When you get older, pensions become very important. And that's what I do for a living. And indeed, sometimes my colleagues say, you're off to this sci-fi stuff again. How do you like all this sci-fi? You know, they call it sci-fi. We call it science fiction or SF. But they accept that, you know. They have their interest in football. I'm not interested in football. Or they're interested in golf, and I'm not interested in golf. I happen to like science fiction in all forms, and they can't understand why that is. But it's very strange, actually. If you like a football team, Manchester United, Chelsea, and you wear your T-shirt, no one bothers. It's not a problem. You know, you're a football fan. But if you wear a T-shirt with Star Trek or Babylon 5 or something, you're considered strange, weird. You know, why is that?
In your opinion, what takes to make a quality sci-fi, science fiction or fantasy movie? Do you need a lot of money, a good story? What?
As I said earlier, I did a piece earlier this year for the UK National Convention all about SF media, which is my area. And I'd said certain things about certain films, good and bad. And I have three mantras, if you like, three things, principles. The first one, and this is the one that applies to the question you've just asked, is it doesn't need, as far as television and film science fiction is concerned, a lot of special effects. It's the story is the most important thing. And to give two examples, I'm going to be murdered for this, but two marvelous science fiction films are great special effects, but the stories are absolute rubbish. One of them is Independence Day, and the other one is Starship Troopers. The battle scenes are wonderful, but the story is rubbish. Whereas, as an example in the other way, a lovely science fiction film from New Zealand, made about 10 years ago, called The Quiet Earth, has just 3 people in it, and there's not much science fiction, there's not much special effects, but it's a lovely story and a low budget with just 3 actors. And lovely, they don't need a lot of special effects to achieve a story. So, as I say, it doesn't need a lot of special. And unfortunately, these days, many films base themselves only on the special effects, which is daft. The story is pushed back, you know.
I want to ask about how is the situation in Ireland about octagons and etc.
Well, the National Convention of Ireland is Octocon, held in October every year, and I'm involved every year with it. I would be, and I run a media program for them, and I publicise it, along with lots of other conventions I publicise. It's quite active. They had a big guest last year, George R. R. Martin, who was here at SFeraKon a couple of years ago. And it's quite interesting in that they've just filmed some of his book, Game of Thrones, and they've done it in Belfast. And it's going very well, I understand. And I think they're looking at filming the next book now. The fandom in Ireland is small because it's a small country, and we also have financial difficulties now. Ireland boomed, and now it's not so good. But the fans in Ireland come to British fan conventions, and Belfast fans from Northern Ireland come down to Dublin and vice versa, because there's no problems in Northern Ireland anymore. It's all peaceful now, and the fandom is, there's no problem. We all like each other and get on very well. The convention is smaller than it used to be, partly because of the economy. But it's still going on every year, and there's a second convention in Ireland called PhoenixCon, which is only literary, there's no media. And also now there's a Discworld convention in Ireland every other year, which Terry Pratchett goes over to, but as you probably know, Terry is suffering from and won't be going to many conventions for much longer. So there's still conventions held in Ireland, much smaller than they used to be, but they're still interesting, and they've an Irish flavour to them.
How small is this? How many visitors are on this convention?
Well, it depends. Sometimes it depends on the guest. Like when we had George R. R. Martin last year, we got about 700, which was quite good. This year coming, we have a guest called John Higgins, who is an artist for comics. Well, we won't get as many. We might get 400 or 500. We did get Terry Pratchett one year, and that was a phenomenal number of people turning up. Even people from Britain came over for that. That was when he wasn't as well known, and we managed to get him. So it depends on the guest, and also the financial situation.
And what are your, in your opinion, pros and cons in SFeraKon?
Well, obviously it's the only one I've ever been to. What is very interesting, I went to a German convention about 5 weeks ago in Dortmund, and there were reasons for my going there to hope they would perhaps hold a Eurocon in a few years' time, and I think I've got that from 2015. But I discovered that most younger Germans do speak English as a second language, but you have to speak very slowly for them to understand. Whereas here, I can speak normal speed, and nearly all Croatians understand me. And I think that's because of the way film and television programs from abroad are shown on Croatian television. You don't dub, you subtitle. And that's noticeable in Portugal and Spain. In Spain, they dub, whereas in Portugal, they subtitle. So as a result, more Portuguese speak English than Spanish do, as a normal language. Not slowly, but normal. And that's, I think, the reason.
And last question, the best book adaptation for movie?
That's a very hard question, because some would say that a Philip K. Dick book is, and Philip K. Dick is very popular at the moment. I mean, they've just done a film called Inception, which is based upon some of his stuff. But probably the most famous book that he wrote was, of course, about counting electric sheep, and that was turned into Blade Runner, which is a superb film. Although it's very confusing because when it was issued, there's various versions, there's director's cuts and all sorts of alternate endings, so there's a whole lot of different versions of it. That certainly stands out as a film transferred from a book, and many science fiction book fans say Blade Runner is superb, and it has certainly excellent qualities to it.
And what about Game of Thrones?
Yes, it's quite good, and everyone's saying it's excellent. And George R. R. Martin was over at the Irish convention last year and came down from Belfast to the convention. He was up looking at some of the post-production and some of the filming, and he said he was very impressed with the sets. He said sometimes the visualization that he had in the book was slightly different to what the art director had put up on the studio. But there was one comment, he said, actually that's better than I imagined it. It's actually very good indeed, and he was very pleased. And it's doing well on the box, the little box.
Okay, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the rest of SFeraKon, and see you next year.
Yes, I have to be here next year.